please be advised that there is material that will be presented that is not AA conference approved material. We believe that Joe and Charlie clearly state when they present material that is not AA conference approved material. The presentation has been color-coded to better assist you as to the origin of the information.
Very valuable pieces of information. Now we're going to put 2 or 3 names up here just to show you, how simple this thing really is. And the first thing on my list, the first name on my list, was this lady named Barbara. God, I love her today. But 34 years ago, I hated this woman with a purple passion. If there'd have been any way that I could have killed her and got by with it, I would gladly have done so. I used to wake at night and fantasize. Now tomorrow morning, on her way to work, and I always believed in her work, and I believed in her being self-supporting through her own contributions. And I'd think on her way to work she's going to get run over by a big semi-truck. And it's not going to be just any semi-truck. It's going to be a very, very affluent trucking company. And they're going to kill her. And then I'm going to sue them. And I'm going to get rid of her. And I'm going to get $2 or $3 million out of this deal at the same time. You Al-Anons are not the only ones that fantasize. We alcoholics do it too. Second name on my list was the Internal Revenue Service. Now, if you wanted to see somebody come unglued and start frothing at the mouth, you just mentioned the Internal Revenue Service in my presence, and I just completely went berserk with them. God, I hated those people. Joe, who was the first one on your list?
Her name was Rose.
Her name was Rose. Now, who's Rose?
She was number 1.
She was number 1. She was wife number 1. How many times you been married?
She filed for divorce on me 4 times.
He says he's been married to 2 women 7 times. That's a pretty damn good record, isn't it?
Phyllis only admits to twice, but I filed on her once and it wasn't even my turn.
Okay, that's how simple column 3 is. And you may have a half a dozen names, you may have 20 or 30, or you may be like me. Hell, you may have 100 and some odd names before you're through. Let's go to column 2. What's the cause of my anger? Why am I so upset with Barbara? Well, this lady had the audacity to file for divorce 3 times the last year before she went to Al-Anon. Hell, she's spending more money on divorces and lawyers than I'm spending on booze and everything that goes with it. And I really, really hated this woman with a purple passion for doing so. Why am I so upset with the Internal Revenue Service? Well, they're trying to put me in jail. That's why I'm so upset with them. Madder than hell at them. Joe, how come you're so upset with Rose?
She had an affair with another man.
Uh-oh. After all
I've done to her.
You can tell we've done this before, can't you? Okay, that's how simple column 2 is. There may be 2 or 3 causes for a particular name. There may just be 1 cause, whatever, we just put them in there. Okay, now we go to column 3. Barbara filing for divorce 3 times the last year before she went to Al-Anon. Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Oh, yeah. What are other people thinking about me now? She's filed for divorce 3 times and I'm still living in the same house with her. Is it a threat to my personal relationships? Sure, she gets a divorce, she's going to take the kids, and I won't have any personal relationships left there. Is it a threat to my security? Oh, yeah, by the time she's through, she and the lawyers will have what little bit I've got left, and I'll end up with nothing. Is it a threat to my sex life? Well, yeah, she probably ain't going to let me have any if she gets a divorce. That's just how simple that thing is. Let's go to the second name, Internal Revenue Service. Them trying to throw me in jail. Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Yeah, what's other people going to think about me if I end up in jail? Is it a threat to my personal relationships? Well, sure, they're not going to let my wife and kid have anything to do with me while I'm in jail. Is it a threat to my security? Oh, yeah. By the time they get through with their fines and everything that goes with it, they'll get it all, whatever little bit I've got left. Is it a threat to my sex life? You bet it is the kind I would like to have. There may be some in there I don't want, but that's just how simple this thing is. Old Rose having an affair with another man. Is that a threat to Joe's self-esteem? Yeah. Sure, what other people going to think about him? Hell, he's not even man enough to keep his own wife at home. Is it a threat? I'm afraid to look. I never know what he's going to put up there. Is it a threat to his personal relationships? Sure. Is it a threat to his security? You better bet it is. He's going to have to go to work now. That woman's been supporting him the last 10 years. Is it a threat to his sex life? Sure it is. That's just how simple filling this thing out really is. It's just not that big a deal. And it really doesn't take very long to fill this thing out. You know, you can sit down and fill this thing out within an hour or two if you want to. Don't try to get it perfect. You never get it perfect. Just fill it out like the book says to do it. Now at the bottom of page 65.
So we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was this world and its people were often quite wrong. Well, I knew that all along. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us when we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse when we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Now, it's plain that a life that includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, that we squander the hours which might have been worthwhile.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know about me. And when I've got a good resentment churning around in my head, I'm pretty well paralyzed from doing anything worthwhile. All I want to do is just sit there and play that thing over and over and over and over and over again. And one of my favorite things that I used to love to do when I was drinking is get up early in the morning, have a cup of coffee and a drink of whiskey, and turn on my resentment replay machine and replay what she did to me yesterday. Replay what he did to me last week. Replay what that damn policeman did to me 6 months ago. Replay what that last boss did to me a year ago. Replay what that damn neighbor said to me 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Replay. And it took me just about an hour to run through that tape, and I loved every moment of it. When that tape would run out, I'd have another drink of whiskey and another cup of coffee, and I would turn on my get even machine. Now, by God, the next time she does that, I'm going to do this and she's going to do that, and wacko, I'm going to put it on her. They're not going to treat me that way. And it'd take another hour to run through my get even tape. I loved every moment of it. When I came to AA, I found myself doing the same thing. The only difference is I wasn't taking a drink of whiskey. I was having a cup of coffee and turn on the replay machine, run it for an hour, have another cup of coffee, turn on the get even machine, and I have absolutely wasted literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. Resentments never did do me any good. They sure didn't make me any money. They never made me feel better. They only made me feel worse. They never straightened up a relationship with another human being. They only became worse and worse and worse. And I really do believe they're absolute, complete, wasted time. Now today I'm convinced that each one of we human beings have an allotted amount of time that we're going to live here on earth. And mine is beginning to come to the end of it. In the last few years in AA is the first time in my life that I can ever remember when I've been sober and peaceful and happy and free. My God, I love to feel good. I didn't know you could be sober and feel as good as I feel today. And what little time I've got left, I want every moment of it to feel good for me. I don't want to waste any more time in resentments and anger and hate and all that crap. I'm just not going to do that anymore. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to waste the rest of my life harboring resentments to other people. That's one of the worst things about a resentment. A complete waste of time. Not only does it block us off from God, but it's a complete waste of time. But even that's not the worst thing. Here's the worst thing.
But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of his spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns when we drink again, and with us to drink is to die.
There's the worst thing about a resentment. When we got a resentment churning around in our head, we don't feel good. And we want to feel better. And our mind begins to think about the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a couple of drinks. And next thing you know, we've convinced ourselves that it's okay to drink. And we become insane, and we drink, and we end up drunk all over again. With us, to drink is to die. Resentments are an absolute killer for people like us. I've seen more people get drunk in AA over resentments than I have anything else. And it really kills people like us. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. This is why you got to have a written inventory. If you tried to do this in your head, you've lost it already. We turn back to that list, that written inventory. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Always before I looked at it to see what those suckers had done to me. Today I look at it to see what that resentment is going to do to me. And if it's going to get me drunk, I'm looking at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. And I stopped and I said, Charlie, how stupid can you be? All my life I've been proud of the fact that I stand on my own 2 feet. Nobody tells me what to do. I don't need your advice, thank you. And I suddenly realized that through my resentments toward them, other people were controlling the way that I think. Other people were ruling and dominating my life for me through my resentments toward them. And when I saw that, I said, to hell with them. I'm not going to let those people live in my head rent-free any longer. I've made a decision to let God direct my thinking. And if those people direct it, God can't. And it's just that damn simple. And I said, man, you really are dumb. Because some of these people have been dead and buried in the graveyard for years. Reaching out from the grave and had me by the yang-yang as far back as I can remember. And I said, to hell with it. I'm not going to let them rule and dominate me any longer. And you know, an amazing thing happened to me. When I saw the truth behind those resentments, when I saw how I was letting them control and dominate my life, that looked so dumb that about 95% of those resentments automatically begin to disappear. We alcoholics fancy ourselves as reasonably intelligent people. I think we are. I don't think we're smarter than others, but we're reasonably intelligent, and we don't like to look dumb. And we see how dumb it is to let other people control our lives through our resentments toward them. Then those resentments don't look very good anymore. And about 95% of them just begin to disappear. But if you're anything like I am, you're probably going to have 4 or 5 or 6 that have been embedded so deeply that just seeing the truth behind them and seeing how dumb they are may not get rid of them for you. And you're going to have a little extra help. Every action step has prayer in it. Every action step realizes that self cannot overcome self. We got to have God's help. We hear always about the step 3 prayers, the step 7 prayer. We never hear about the prayers in step 4. Let's see what we can do about those resentments that are so deeply embedded that just seeing the truth of them didn't get rid of them for us.
He said, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. Can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. It can't be done. This was our course. We realized that the people who had wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And here's the prayer. We ask God to help us to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or arguing. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. And I used to lay awake nights thinking how I could get even with all those people that I used to resent. I always wanted to get even with them. Finally figured out how to get even with them. The way you get even with people is you pray for them. If you pray for them, then you're even. Isn't that something? And I had some deep-seated resentment, very deep-seated resentments. And I went off to a conference when I was sober about 4 months, and I met this lady named Alabama Carruthers. She loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and she was a tremendous lady, and she loved life. She couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. She was about 60 years old, and boy, she was so excited. And she said a couple of things that night at her talk that really went off in my head like a thunderbolt. One of the things she said that night was she had a soul sickness. And I said, that's what I have, a soul sickness. I was sitting on that bar stool my last night, and I had a sick feeling in my stomach. It wasn't a throwing up sick, it was just sick. And I finally heard a word to identify the feeling, which is a soul sickness. And another thing she said was she has peace of mind tonight. And I thought to myself, my God, how long has it been since I've had peace of mind? That's what I've always wanted, was peace of mind, and never did have it. And after the meeting was over with, I was able to talk with Alabama. We were sitting in the lobby of this old hotel, and everybody had gone off to bed, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and my friend, sponsor at that time, George, was laying in her lap asleep. And I finally was able to talk to Alabama. And I said, Alabama, you said you had peace of mind. How did you get peace of mind? And she said, well, Joe, tell me what's going on in your mind. And I guess this might have been the first time that I ever told anybody what was going on in my mind, really. And I talked about that gal named Rose, because I used to drink and go off, and I didn't return right away either. One time I was gone for about 3 months, and I was sitting in the bar one night drinking, and I got to thinking. Now, you all know either drink or think, but don't get the two of them mixed up. Well, I was drinking, and I got to thinking, well, she hadn't seen me in about 3 months, and I bet she's lonely. I mean, wouldn't you be if you hadn't seen me in about 3 months? So I said, I think I'll go over there and visit. Does anybody know what I mean by visit? Make sure you understand. I'm going to go over there and visit. So I went over there, and I knocked on the door, and she kind of peeked, and I just broke in is what I did. And I got in my home, and there sat an old boy in my recliner, watching my TV in my house with my wife, and I'm making payments on all that. What are you going to do? Well, I did. I jumped on that old boy, and he liked to beat me to death on my own living room floor. Threw me out in the yard and told me not to ever come back. Boy, you think I wasn't resentful. And I had all that resentment in my brains, and later on, and months later, I met Phyllis, and months later after that, we got married, and I took all those old resentful, angry feelings that I had into that marriage. Phyllis had come out of a bad deal, and she brought hers with her, and we were living together and married and trying to enforce our list on each other. I had a list this long that she wasn't going to do, and she had a list that long that I wasn't going to do, and it was just awful. And no wonder we had trouble. But Alabama said, well, I got peace of mind, and I said, how did you get it? And she said, well, Joe, you just have a resentful mind. You're mad everywhere. And she said, and she pulled out one of these books out of her purse, a big purse. You know how they're digging down in there. And Alabama come out with this book, and she said, Joe, on page 551 is the story of a lady who had a lot of resentments, and very deep-seated resentment. It's called Freedom from Bondage on page 551 of the 3rd edition. I think it might be the same.
It's the same.
Okay, on the 4th edition. The 3rd paragraph, this lady said, I've had many spiritual experiences since I've been in the program. Many that I didn't recognize right away, for I'm slow to learn, and they take many guises. But one was so outstanding, I like to pass it on whenever I can in the hope that will help someone else as it helped me. As I said earlier, self-pity and resentment were my constant companions, and my inventory began to look like a 33-year diary, for I seemed to have a resentment against everyone I'd ever known. All but one responded to the treatment suggested in steps immediately, but this one posed a problem, and it was against my mother, and was 25 years old. I had fed it, fanned it, and nurtured it as one might a delicate child, and it had become as much a part of me as my breathing. It had provided me with my excuses for the lack of education, my marital failures, personal failures, inadequacies, and of course my alcoholism. And though I really thought I'd been willing to part with it now, I knew I was reluctant to let it go.
She really, really loved this resentment.
If it did all those things for me, I would hate to give it up too. But one morning, however, I realized I had to get rid of it before my reprieve was running out. And if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk. And I didn't want to get drunk anymore. In my prayers that morning, I asked God to point out to me some way to be free of this resentment. During the day, a friend of mine brought me some magazines to take to a hospital group I was interested in. And I looked through them, and a banner across the front of one featured an article by a prominent clergyman in which I caught the word resentment. He said, in effect, and here it is, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks, and you'll find you've come to mean it and want it for them. And when you realize that where you used to feel bitterness, resentment, and hatred, you now feel compassion, understanding, and love. I went home after that weekend and got in bed, and sure enough, my old mind started running all over again. My mind raced uncontrollably in those days. And I said, I think I'll pray for those people. So I prayed for them, and the next morning when I woke up, I said, I think I'll pray for those people. And I prayed for those people and added some people to the list. And during the day, I'd pray for those people. Every time I could think about it, I would pray for those people. It went on and on. I don't know. I was in constant prayer, it seemed like, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or more. I don't know how long it was. Be driving down the street, praying out loud in the car. I'm sure people who saw me thought I was nuts. Well, I was. But one day I was at the corner of 31st and Lewis in Tulsa. It's a beautiful, beautiful area in our town. It was after one of our cold winters. I mean, it wasn't real cold, but it felt that way. But it was cold for us. As after one of our cold winters, I got stuck in a traffic light, just the length of a traffic light that morning, and it was a beautiful morning. And I looked over there at that house, and the grass was green, and the trees were all blooming out, and the squirrels were jumping around, and the flowers were blooming, and the tulips were red and yellow, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful morning. And I thought to myself, my God, how long has it been since I've seen those beautiful colors? And you know what? I don't know if I'd ever seen those colors before that morning, until that morning. When this book talks about being cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit, I know what that means. I really do. And I don't ever want to go back there again. It's a place that's hard to get out of. But through prayer, I got out of it. And for a while there, I thought that those people should change. They never did change. The change happened within me. I don't lay awake nights thinking about them anymore. Some of those people are still SOBs. And they'll always be that way. But I don't lay awake nights thinking about them either. And I'm free of it, thank God.
We want to emphasize as we take these action steps that there's nothing negative about any of these. Always there's a positive happening as we take these steps. Just think, here's an old mind that was filled with resentments. These display cases completely crammed full. 95% of them disappeared when I saw how stupid that they really were. The other 5% can be removed through prayer, through praying for these people. In other words, those resentments have now been emptied out of my file cabinet, or my display cases. And when that happens, there's a natural law that applies. And it says, nature abhors a vacuum. No such thing as a vacuum or a void. There's always something trying to rush in to fill it up. As those resentments disappear, God's not going to leave another hole in my head. Got enough of those already. When those resentments disappear, they have to be replaced with something else. And the only thing that can replace them will be the opposite of the resentment. And where my mind used to be filled with resentment, it's now filled with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, understanding, goodwill toward my fellow man. That's God's thinking. God's thinking has now moved in and replaced the old self-will resentment thinking. And to my amazement, I realized I didn't have to go to any other fellowships. I didn't have to read any other books to find love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. If God dwells within me and my book says He does, that's always been a part of my makeup. I just never could use it before. In my chase for money, power, prestige, sex, and what I thought were the good things of life, those feelings had to be repressed to let me operate on the level I wanted to operate on. But now that the resentments are gone, they automatically come to the surface. Damnedest thing I ever saw in my life. It really does work. I'm in much less chance of drinking now than I was before I started the inventory. If the resentments are gone and that part of my mind is filled with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill, I'm beginning to find a little bit of serenity. I'm beginning to find a little bit of happiness. I'm not as restless and irritable as I used to be. I'm not filled with anger anymore. And I'm in much less chance of drinking than I was before, and I've only done 1/3 of step 4. Isn't that something? But it would do no good for me to get rid of these resentments if I didn't know how to keep them from coming back. And the world's full of sick people, and they're going to do it to me again tomorrow. And if I'm not careful, I'll resent. And I don't seem to be able to have just one resentment. When I get one, the next thing you know, I've got 2. And then I've got 4, and then I've got 8, and then I've got 16, and then I'm up to 32, and I'm a basket case all over again. There's one more thing I have to do in order to keep these things out of my mind in the future. Let's go to page 67. Let's unfold the last 2 columns on that resentment sheet. And let's see now what we can do to keep this from happening in the future. In the middle of the page it says, referring to our list again. That's why you got to have a written inventory. This is the second time now we've had to go back to it. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. God, we've never done this. We've always looked to see what they've done. We've never looked to see the part we might have played in it. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Now, the basic character defects talked about in the big book are those that I just read. Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened, and we added inconsiderate because it's going to pop up in just a page or two. Though a situation has not been entirely our fault, we try to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventories was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them, we placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So I went back to my list again, and I looked at that lady named Barbara. And I said, okay, Charlie, do what your book's telling you. You forget the fact that she filed for divorce 3 times. What did you do, if anything, to set that thing in motion? We go to the 4th column. You'll notice it says, putting out of the mind wrongs others have done, I resolutely look for my own mistakes. What did I do, if anything, to set in motion trains of circumstances, which in turn caused people or institutions to hurt me and eventually led to my resentment of them for doing so? I said, forget what Barbara did. What did you do, if anything, to set this in motion? Took me less than 5 seconds. I said, if I hadn't been out there screwing around, I wouldn't have got caught. And if I hadn't have got caught, she probably wouldn't have filed for divorce. Now, Joe calls that committing adultery. I just called it out there screwing around.
I don't call it.
Another 5 seconds. And I said, if I hadn't been lying to her all the time, and running around cheating, lying, doing things behind her back, she might not have filed for divorce in the first place. I said, if I hadn't been so damn selfish, wanting what I wanted and to hell with my wife and children, she might not have filed for divorce in the first place. If I hadn't been so inconsiderate of my spouse and my children's needs and wants, always putting me first, well, she might not have filed for divorce in the first place. I begin to see with that first name why I loved resentment so well. Because you see, I would do something that would hurt Barbara. And she in turn retaliated against me and created pain and suffering for me. And I couldn't stand the fact that I was a liar and a cheat and a thief and an adulterer. So what I did, I played that resentment over and over and over and over and over in my head. And each time I played it over, I distorted the picture. And I made what she did a little bit worse. And I made what I did a little bit less. And let me play it long enough, I can convince myself, well, hell, I was just standing there doing nothing. And she did it to me, and it's all her damn fault. That's why we love resentments. Because it's a way we can transfer blame to others and never have to look at ourselves and see what we're doing. And we men go from woman to woman to woman, and you ladies go from man to man to man. And we go from job to job to job, and city to city to city, and state to state to state, and country to country to country, and it's always their damn fault. I don't believe that you and I could live with ourselves when we're out there doing our thing if we had to see the truth behind what's going on. But you see, we never have to see that because we've got this convenient little thing called resentments that we can use to transfer all blame to others and make ourselves as pure as the driven snow. I thought, my God, Charlie, have you done that with these other people on here? And I looked at the Internal Revenue Service. I said, forget the fact that they're trying to put you in jail. What did you do, if anything, to set that thing in motion? Hell, it was very simple. I was cheating on my income tax and they caught me. And rather than admit that I'm a thief and a liar, I use my resentments to transfer all blame to the Internal Revenue Service and never had to look at me. That way we can go ahead and live the kind of life we're wanting to live and not have to change. Because after all, it's all their damn fault in the first place. And I had Joe on Rose. What did you do, if anything, to cause Rose to do what she did?
Adultery, committing adultery.
He did the same thing I did. He's out there screwing around.
I was committing adultery.
Laying out at night, not coming home for a week or sometimes a month or two or three. Not supporting Rose, and she got tired of that crap. And she found her a man that would pay some attention to her. And she probably wouldn't have done that if Joe hadn't have been doing what he was doing. And I looked down my list of 152 names, and I'm ashamed to admit it. There wasn't a damn name on there that I hadn't done something to them that hurt them. And they retaliated against me, and then I resented them for doing so, and I transferred all blame to them and made me as pure as the driven snow. Nobody ever beat the hell out of me for keeping my mouth shut. No policeman ever threw me in jail for sober driving. No boss ever fired me because I was a good employee. But when I played it over and distorted the picture, by God, it was their fault, not mine. Absolutely amazed me when I saw that. Now in column 5. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Which of the above character defects caused me to do what I did or caused me to want to hold on to the old resentment, even though I may have done nothing to cause it? You know, in this deal with Barbara, was I selfish in doing the things that I did that created the problems for her? You better bet I was. I could have cared less about what Barbara wanted and needed. I wanted what I wanted whenever I wanted it, and by God, I was after it. Was I dishonest in that situation with Barbara? Sneaking around behind her back, lying to her continually. I don't really understand how people who are non-alcoholic can live with people like us when we're out there doing our thing. It's got to be absolute living hell for them in order to do that. Was I self-seeking and frightened when I was out there doing those things that created the problem for Barbara? You bet. I was getting close to 40 years old. And I was saying to myself, man, if you don't get out there and get some of that stuff now, you'll be too damned old to do that before long. You know, fear drives us and rules us and dominates us, causes us to do things that hurt other people. Was I inconsiderate of my wife and children? Sure I was. If I'd have been thinking about their needs and wants ahead of my own, I wouldn't have been doing those things in the first place. I begin to see finally in the 5th column the type of character that I had become through living a life run on self-will. And it made me sick. I always thought I was a pretty good guy. I just drank too much. But when I really inventoried this across and looked into that 5th column, I could begin to see how selfish I really was. How dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate I had really become. And I begin to see if I don't do something about those things in that 5th column, I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things over and over and over. I'm going to keep right hurting people and institutions. They're going to retaliate, and I'm going to resent, and I'm going to end up drunk over it. Just think, if I could become a little less selfish, don't have to be perfect, never will be perfect, but if I could become a little less selfish, maybe I wouldn't be doing things that hurt other people. If I could become a little more honest, maybe I wouldn't be lying and cheating and stealing and telling lies and have to worry about what those people are going to do whenever they catch me. If I could become a little less self-seeking and frightened, maybe I could find the courage to start facing life on life's terms like it ought to be instead of my terms. If I could become a little less inconsiderate of other human beings, then maybe I would take what they need and want into consideration before action, and maybe I wouldn't hurt so many people. At the very least, I'm going to have to come to terms with some of these things that I find in that fifth column. Because if I stay selfish, if I stay dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things I've always done. I'm going to keep right on hurting people and institutions. And they're going to retaliate. And I'm going to resent, and the fear and the guilt and remorse is going to eat me up. And sooner or later, I'm going to get drunk over it. You know, what we're really doing here, we're in the process of doing step 4, the inventory step, and this is the resentment part of it. So we're going to put a little 4 up there at the top of this sheet. Now, out in the fifth column, I now see the exact nature of the wrongs that I'm going to talk to another human being about in step 5. The resentment is the wrong. That's what blocks me from God. But the exact nature of something is what's the inherent characteristic of it, what's at the core of it. My selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate nature is the exact nature of the wrong. So that's what I'm going to talk about in step 5. When a guy comes to me today for a step 5, I don't care whether he's committed adultery twice or 20 times. What I'm interested in is what's within his character that causes him to do that. That's what we're going to have to look at and work on so he won't do that anymore. I don't care if he's stolen 10 times or 1,000 times. What I'm interested in is what was in his character that causes him to steal. That's what we're going to have to work on to keep him from stealing in the future. So I've got the information in the fifth column that I'm going to use for step 5. Also in the fifth column, I now have the character defects that I'm going to become willing to turn loose of in step 6. Knowing full well that if I don't turn loose of them, I can't stay sober. Not wanting to turn loose of them, but knowing I have to turn loose of them, that's what I'm going to use for step 6. Also in the fifth column, I now have the shortcomings I'm going to ask God to take away in step 7. I'm going to be willing to turn that selfish, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate character loose in 6, and I'm going to ask God to take that away from me in 7. Now, quite naturally, in my case, and in your case some of them, in my case all of them, the names in column 1 are going to come off of this sheet and be added to a sheet to be used later on for steps 8 and 9. When we get to 8, the book says we've got the list. We made it when we took step 4. And in my case, all these in column 1 were people that I had harmed. In your case, maybe all of them, or at least part of them. So I really set myself up with this simple little sheet for everything that I need, resentment-wise, for steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Have you ever seen anything that simple? I haven't, and it works just like clockwork. Now, I hear some of you saying, and I hear good, I've got awful good hearing, I hear some of you saying, well, Charlie, that's probably true for people that we hurt them, and then they retaliated against us. But how about those that hurt us? And we didn't do anything to them. How about those that hurt us as we were kids growing up? How about those that hurt us in our marriages and we didn't do anything to them to cause it? You know, I've heard over and over and over about the physical abuse, the mental abuse, the sexual abuse, that you ladies suffer sometimes as kids growing up and etc. Believe me, you're not by yourself. I've taken very few fifth steps with another man that the same kind of crap comes up in our lives also. What about those people? Aren't we justified in resenting them for what they did to us? I guess we are if we want to get drunk over it. But you see, a justified resentment blocks you off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Just like an unjustified resentment blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. When you've got a justified resentment against somebody else, then they are controlling the way you're thinking. They're controlling your actions. They're controlling your life for you. Now, we've made a decision to let God direct our thinking. And if we got a justified resentment, then that person who we resent, they are controlling our thinking. And it really doesn't make any sense to let somebody hurt us 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, and then let them hurt us every day for the rest of our lives through our resentment toward them. We've given them the power to kill us. And if we've got one of those kind of resentments, for God's sake, get it on this sheet of paper. Put down the name. What did they do? What part of self was affected? What did I do, if anything? In this case, nothing. But then let's look in the 5th column. Am I using this for some selfish purpose? Am I so dishonest with myself that I refuse to see the truth behind it? Now let me tell you something. It's probably going to upset some of you too. If you've got one of those resentments in your head today, it isn't true. It isn't true. It started on truth. But if you've played it over and over and over for years, the picture is distorted. It's not what really took place. Let's be honest and look at it as truthfully as we can. Am I so afraid of facing life without it that I'm afraid to turn it loose? With the greatest excuse in the world. If he hadn't have done that to me, then I wouldn't have to be the way I am today. Rationalization and justification. The lady in the book, in the example that Joe just read, she used her resentment against her mother to justify her lack of education. After all, if Mama hadn't have done that, then I could have gotten an education. Bull. She could have gotten an education if she'd have wanted to, bad enough. She used it to justify her marital failure. Bull. Mama didn't have anything to do with her marital failure. She even used that resentment against her mother to justify her alcoholism. Bull. I'll tell you why she became alcoholic. She kept on drinking whiskey. And Mama didn't pour it down her. She poured it down herself. The greatest excuse in the world is if they hadn't have done that to me, then I wouldn't have to be the way I am today. And the instant we say that, we're saying that other people are determining who we are and what we are. And I think in today's terms they call that victimization. In AA we don't have room for victimization. We want to feel good. We want to feel happy. We want to feel peaceful. We want to feel free. And until we get rid of those kind of resentments also, we're never going to be free of the past. And if we can't get free of the past, then we can't really enjoy the future. And if you look at it honestly and see what you're doing with that resentment, just maybe it will disappear also, just like those that were unjustified. And if it doesn't disappear, we've got the court of last resort. We can always pray for them. Now, if I pray for one of those suckers that I hate, that doesn't mean that I approve of what they did to me. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to walk hand in hand with them and trip the light fantastic for the rest of my life. What that means is I'm damn tired of letting them make me sick. And if praying for them will get rid of that resentment, then I'm going to pray for them. And it really does work. I don't care what the resentment is. We can be free of it. And if we're not wanting to be free of it, then we've got to be used it for some reason. Rationalization and justification. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't have to be what I am today. We can be anything we want to be. We can be completely free of that kind of stuff if we really, really wish to do so, Joe.
The only thing I have to comment on here is that we didn't write down any dirty, filthy, rotten things there, did we? No, we just found the facts and faced the facts and accepted the facts as we see them. And we didn't psychoanalyze ourselves either. We didn't say that the reason we have those resentments and so on and so forth is because Mommy set me on the body chair backwards. We didn't go into that. We just saw the facts, faced the facts, and accepted the facts. And simplicity was the key. I have a little story to tell you this morning. It's about this fellow who was sitting at the bar and he was doing like this. The guy next to him said, "What's wrong, fella?" He said, "Well, I went and got me some new teeth and they don't fit. Have to hold them in." The guy said, "Well, here, try these." So he gave him a pair of teeth. He put them on. He said, "No, those are too loose also." He said, "Well, here, try these." Put them on. He said, "No, those are too tight." He said, "Well, here, try these." He said, "Well, that's pretty good." He said, "What are you, a dentist?" He said, "No, I'm an undertaker."
Are you through?
I'm through.